Hey there, friends on YouTube and elsewhere out in the internet sphere. We are here back again for another episode of the Painfully Honest Tech podcast. We took last week off to give the thanks.
For the giving.
Yeah, and we took last week off. I had to travel to West Virginia, which is where I'm from, and it's a 12+ hour drive from where I live back to West Virginia, and
That's hateful.
yeah, we do it in 2 days to try and make it better, like, just to try and make it a little bit easier, but it is not easy. It is not easy. I mean, I used to do it all in one shot when I was in my 30s.
At least there's
But
some scenery.
yeah, it doesn't really like so you go through a stretch of Indiana between like the Illinois. We drive I-80 to 74 to 70, and then go back up and pick up 80 for a short period of time when we get toward Western Pennsylvania. And there's a stretch through Indiana that kind of starts at Peoria, Illinois, but then just goes straight to Indianapolis. It's like 3 or 4 hours of nothing. It's flat.
Have you ever driven in Texas before?
I have not. I can imagine though.
So
like
you could start on I-10 and drive from Houston. I think it's like 14 hours or something like that, straight across to San Antonio, and it's basically 80% of the way is just flat nothingness.
yeah. You start to see the change in topography really once you pass Columbus, Ohio, and start to move toward eastern Ohio into western Pennsylvania. Then the landscape starts to change, and you're climbing up some hills, and you see some rolling hills and that kind of thing. But
Appalachians.
yeah, and I gotta admit, so having grown up in West Virginia and having lived in Iowa now for 18 years, still to this day, every time I come over like into the hilly part, like I get the feels. It's just really weird. West Virginia is a weird place to be from.
Is that because you're a coal miner's daughter?
No. My uncles were coal miners, but my dad was he was a lot of things. Let's just leave it at that.
I landed in West Virginia one time, and I got the feels, but I got the feels like I was going to die because there's a little airport runway on top of basically, I guess they leveled like the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, we got to make a steep landing. It was in a military plane, like, because this is a really short runway.
Yeah.
And we landed, and then we stopped very abruptly. And then as we turned left, I saw we were like 50 yards from going over at the edge of this mountain. I'm like, wow, I'm glad I couldn't see that when we landed.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting place to operate any sort of motor vehicle. I learned to drive on these roads that, I imagine Texas is a big place. You probably have some wide roads and plenty of room out there to spread out. The same way here in Iowa, but like, yeah, I got used to driving on these roads that are maybe like 12 feet across for 2 lanes. and they're just like, and they just sort of wind through everything, and I know how to drive them, but it scares the crap out of my wife and my daughter, and because they're like, how can you go so fast on this road? I'm like, well, it says 35. But it's a lot of fun. So I was back there over the holiday, and it was kind of a bittersweet thing. My mom passed a few weeks ago, and so it's the first holiday without her. And I was also doing a music thing with the band that I was in the like late high school, early college. A bunch of people got together because the guitar player from that band, his wife has cancer, and it was kind of like it had metastasized, et cetera. So she didn't have long, but in between the time that this show was set up and when the show happened, she went down to Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York, which has like one of the best cancer facilities around.
Yeah.
And I guess they do a different kind of radiation treatment, and it's longer, but they do shorter doses. And so she'd been through radiation treatment and didn't respond, but I guess she went through this and then went a month later to get scanned, and there was no sign of metastatic disease.
That's amazing.
Which, I mean, yeah, she had, I forget what kind of colorectal cancer she has, but it's one that isn't really all that responsive to a lot of treatments. And so, yeah, I mean, that's good news. But yeah, so I went and we did that show, but now I'm just totally exhausted.
Well, I bet you had a lot of time to for some introspection while you were driving the West Virginia roads to think about, would you drive a Cybertruck on one of these roads?
Cybertruck. I have to admit, when the Cybertruck was announced, I was pretty jazzed about it. I was like, that's pretty cool looking. And I didn't really think about it practically. I just said, I just thought to
So you
myself,
looked at it like Elon.
yeah, I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's like it's all triangly, right? And then they did they threw the steel ball at the window, the indestructible window, and it broke. So they tried it again and broke it again. I guess he redid it to like what was it, today or yesterday that they did
Yeah,
the official reveal?
it was yesterday, and it's funny. I when I saw it too, I had initial thoughts and feelings too. But the first thing that I did was I had to go run to my collection of childhood drawings to make sure there was no intellectual property theft.
Yeah,
Because I used to draw trucks that looked like that when I was like 6.
yeah,
I didn't.
because it's hard to
That's for
draw
sure.
curves when you're a toddler.
Or a
So
billionaire.
yeah, and
So
so now the Cybertruck is starting delivery,
yeah.
and our good friend of the show, Marquez Brownlee, got to spend, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks or something with what was still a prototype of the Cybertruck, but not the officially like what's going to be shipped Cybertruck. And he got to spend time with the one that's $100,000. And I'm gonna bring it up here
That's a
on
lot
the
of money.
screen. Yeah, it's a crazy amount of money. Here's your Cybertruck, right? And
Mhm.
of course they stole the Cyberpunk 2077 font.
Yeah, I see that. I
They
mean,
just they just made it
well,
like it looked like paint.
maybe they paid them. I don't know. Maybe I doubt they did, but maybe they licensed it. I don't know.
Well, to be fair, this kind of like angular typography is part and parcel with that sort of cyberpunk,
Yeah,
future
it
like.
is kind of hard to copyright something like that, so or trademark it. So I'm like,
But I feel like knowing that, and they had to know that Cyberpunk 2077's been out for what, 2 years, almost 3 years, something like that. And so they had to be aware. And apparently this logo, if that's what you want to call it, is embossed, like stamped in the steel of it all over the place in the car.
ugh.
So
I'm
yeah,
not
it doesn't
crazy
say
about that.
Tesla anywhere. But it says Cybertruck in this font, like in a bunch of places.
I
And
think
it's
that they should just left it at Tesla. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that you're in a Cybertruck at that point.
I, not to get too semantic about linguistics, but that's sort of my thing. Cyber is a prefix that's like, robotic, computer robotic related, right?
Or internet,
Yeah,
cyberspace, like usually
cyberspace.
something technologically related, like usually fringe, cutting edge, kind of.
But I don't get the connotation of something tangible when I think cyber. It's like your brain. Cyberpunk is kind of a thing, and so yeah, having read a bunch of William Gibson books when I was back in the 90s, I never that word never really seemed like tangible. So Cybertruck, it seems like a misnomer to me because
It seems like if you were living in the Matrix and bought a car, then that's what they would sell.
yeah, yeah,
Because you'd have a Cybertruck in cyberspace that you could drive, not in a physical space.
yeah. So they announced this thing almost to the day 4 years ago. So I kind of like, and there was a whole thing where you could like put down $100 to reserve your space for one, and
I
all
did
that
that.
kind of stuff. And a lot of people did put up the $100, and then it was just like years went by, and there wasn't a whole lot of info coming out of Tesla about when or if it was going to actually happen. They did like show us one, but it didn't
So
really look like this entirely.
they had
I
that
feel,
cool LED bar for the lights on the top of it that I actually liked. That they
yeah,
they retconned that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's a little more snub nosed than I remember the original model being. But they try to make it look like a moon lander like vehicle. You just land on the moon and drive around in this Cybertruck built for any
Yeah.
planet. It says here, no paint chips because it's made out of stainless steel.
I wonder. I wonder. So I have a thought process here.
Okay.
So remember, whenever SpaceX got really big, they won the contracts, and then they're like, "We're going to send a roadster into space." I wonder if the first starship that goes to the moon will be carrying a Cybertruck.
That's a good question. I don't know what kind of modifications you would have to have in order for the Cybertruck to really work.
I think it would be
Uh,
minimal because I mean, there's no combustion. So if you just send it up there, I mean, clearly this is much better than what we sent up there in the 70s. So I mean, I would think that it would probably drive as is.
yeah, yeah, you may be right. And I guess when it first was announced and we saw the prototype and I was kind of psyched about it, I didn't really think about the practicality of it. And I think that now that I haven't seen one in person, but I've at least seen a person in one.
Yeah, so you get some scope.
So you get a sense of the scale of it. And we were talking a little bit before the show started about like I own a pickup truck
Hmm.
and grew up in pickup trucks with my dad. Usually they were, near death, but my dad was
Oh
really
yeah,
good at keeping them alive.
I I've had trucks since I mean my very first car I drove in 2001 that I bought was a truck. I've had them. I've had trucks for 20 plus years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would venture to guess that no one who's going to use this is going to buy it for any sort of truck like jobs.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at this video that you have pulled up right now, and I see them scooping dirt and putting it into the back of this Cybertruck. And I'm like, I don't think anyone in ever will put dry dirt in the back of this truck.
Yeah. No, I don't either. It's cool as a cargo area, but it's deceptive. If you look at the profile view of the car,
It looks shallow.
you've got everything that's in within the windows, right? So this window outline that's kind of both the front and the back seat.
Hmm.
Uh, that's actually the cab of the truck, and everything beyond the window is
Can
truck
you have your
bed.
mouse cursor over that, or will it show up on the video?
Yeah, it's not showing up, but oh, there
Oh,
it
there we
is.
go. There we
Okay.
go. Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So like the bed probably starts right here. Well, right
yeah,
about
yeah.
a
So
little bit behind that.
because I don't see a good photo of it here, but when the louvered tonneau cover retracts, you can see the back window. So there is a
Hmm.
back window. However, when the tonneau cover is on it, you got no back window.
Yeah, I mean it's not as bad as things used to be. I mean, you and I remember the truck days when there was no such thing as a backup camera, so you're like throwing up a prayer sometimes when you got to go in reverse. But
Yeah.
when your bed's full. But now with the extensive cameras they have and the sensors on the back, I don't think that's a horrible issue. But when I take a look at this, I'm just like, okay. I mean, you and I are both cutting edge tech enthusiasts. We like new stuff. So,
Right.
so from that vein, I do appreciate that it is finally out there. But yeah, from a practicality perspective, and then a lot of people are hating on it because the mileage really hasn't increased that much. And you would think with the truck that big, they would have increased the mileage maybe a little bit, especially because if you do want to use it for any of these practical applications like towing, you're basically going to cut your battery life probably in half.
Well, and part of the thing is, so I think it's deceptive. Like you might look at this thing and think it's like the size of a Ford Edge or a Ford Escape, you
Hmm.
know,
Oh, it's
but
big.
really it's like maybe like 6 inches to a foot shorter than a full size pickup. Now it's
Yeah.
not as tall, but so it's a pretty big vehicle. And the top end model has three motors.
Yeah.
And
Not four, which is surprising.
and I don't know exactly why they went that direction, but it's got 340 miles range estimated. And to me, I don't think it's a matter of, how many motors or anything like that. I wonder if it's just a matter of, with battery technology, can they push it that much further without just putting lots more batteries in there?
Well, here's the thing, like, whenever it comes to phones, the production cycle starts about 12 to 15 months before it. Once you really get kind of things locked and cemented in, it's really difficult to go back and change things.
Right.
So this truck was designed probably 5 to 6 years ago, and I was just looking through my email because I wanted to get the date for when I reserved mine because I reserved the basic model. Um, got my confirmation order here, single motor. I reserved it on March 9th of 2021. So I'm coming up on 3 years ago that I reserved my model, and it's not going to
Right.
be available until 2025.
Right.
And so this truck basically hit production readiness, I would say, based off of the prototype, like they weren't going to change that much fundamentally 4
Right.
years ago. So they're not up to date with this new battery stuff like a lot of the newer EVs have.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me is that, so there are three models. There's the one that's being showcased and delivered right now, which is the $100,000 three motor long distance range vehicle, right?
Mhm.
340 miles, 11,000 pounds towing capacity, which is a lot. I mean, you could tow some stuff with that. I mean, for comparison, my Chevy or my Ford Bronco Sport towing capacity is like 2,500 pounds. So,
Well, a lot of that has to do with the drivetrain, regardless
right.
of how much power you actually have, because you got to be able to convert that energy and pull the weight.
This
Um,
this thing has over 800 horsepower.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
The one that I have reserved, I was looking at it. So you say, yeah, 11,000 pounds towing capacity for the max model. For the single motor model, which is the one that I've reserved, is 7,500 pounds. But I got to tell you, I don't tow things, so
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about that. But I mean, I don't envision a lot of these being used for hotshot trucks. I'm just saying that right now.
Yeah. No. No. And the thing, I mean, maybe this is the kind of thing where you're a weekend boater, or you take your motorcycles out to off-road with them or something. But it's not, this is not a work vehicle.
No, no, no.
Uh and so that brings me to the question. I mean, 2.6 seconds 0 to 60 is insane, sure. And all of, like, 800 plus horsepower, all crazy impressive numbers. The horsepower thing, I think, is deceptive because you're talking about horsepower as it relates to an electric motor as opposed to an internal combustion engine.
I'd like to
And
know how many feet pounds of torque that it has. It's got to
yeah,
be like 1,100.
I didn't hear that number, and I'm not sure. They're not putting it on here. But there's just some weird stuff about it that I think you have to buy this thing knowing that you're making some compromises
Hmm.
in, and I just don't know, like, you'd have to be a certain kind of wealthy to buy a compromised vehicle from a operational standpoint for $100,000.
So
You
this
know,
truck, this is not a yeah, it's not a normal truck. I mean, and it's even a stretch, and like we're not being just crotchety old men here. I mean, we're just practical discussion to this.
right?
So there's not you look at the Ford Lightning, like the Ford Raptor Lightning or whatever in the world, F-150 Lightning,
Yeah,
and I was looking at it just to try and get kind of a feel for everything going on. And that one, so their base model gets less than 300 miles, their extended range gets 350. So I was thinking maybe it was closer to 500 or 400 because I've seen a lot of vehicles now that are starting to push over that 400-mile range.
right,
And still, like my Model Y, I've got a 2021 Model Y, and I barely get like 190 like on the perfect day. So
right.
it's supposed to get like 230, but these things never get what they say they're going to get.
Yeah,
So if you buy this and it says it's going to get 350 miles, you're probably going to get 310.
yeah, maybe. Uh, and again, it depends if you're loading it up with anything.
That's going to
Th
degrade the battery.
Yeah, that's gonna impact the battery. If you live somewhere that's cold part of the year,
Yeah.
that impacts the battery. I had a Chevy Volt that was rated for 35 miles of just on battery operation, but in the winter you start the car up and it's 10 plus miles per hour or miles available less
Oh
because
yeah,
the batteries are cold.
I ran into that issue. So I got my Tesla last summer, and last winter we took it to North Texas to go visit family. And I took my Model Y, my wife took her Model 3, and both of them are supposed to get about 230 miles of range.
Yeah,
And on a full charge, we were getting like 140.
right.
And it was just like perpetually charging this thing just to like go eat dinner or go to my family's house 30 miles down the road. So there's a lot of stuff that these still are very much as you want to call them full production vehicles, they have so many limitations in a lot of different areas, especially for the price tags.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that this this splash page that they have for the vehicle doesn't have any pictures of the interior. Uh, and I think that that's important. One, looking at the way that the tailgate comes down and the tonneau cover is angled, right? It
Mhm.
kind of looks like a futuristic stainless steel Eldorado.
I
You
want to
know?
capture something here real quick though. Look what he's doing. He's got a buzzsaw plugged into a
Yeah,
power outlet on the back of his truck. But if you read here about power your site, it says 11.5 kilowatts, which is a lot.
yeah,
You can plug that directly into your home. So this truck, if you rig your house up properly, which I'm sure it does if you have the Tesla Powerwall, basically you could reverse feed power into your house as a generator, and
yeah.
that's pretty cool. I gotta say I didn't know you could do that, and that to me is really cool.
Yeah, in NKBHD's video, he showed this panel, and it has 110. Well, I think no, it's got 120 volts and 240 volts.
Yep.
And the 240 you can use to charge another car, or like you said, plug into your house, and you could run your house from your car. I don't know how long that would last, if but there
Probably
there
not
def-
long, but I
there
mean,
definitely are some cool things about it. Uh, but when I looked at the interior, it it doesn't have a yoke wheel, but it
I,
has like a rectangular wheel. And
I thought it was gonna come with a yoke.
yeah, that's what they showed it with when they announced it, but the production model has like not a full-size circular steering wheel, but sort of a truncated, flattened top and bottom. And a lot of the stuff that you would like, it doesn't have a rear view mirror.
It
So
doesn't?
no. And
Huh.
it comes with side mirrors, as you can see right here,
Mhm.
but the side mirrors are removable. And the only reason it comes with side mirrors is because it's mandatory.
Well, when you drive a Tesla, and so what happens when you initiate a turn? Or you can just have your cameras on, but whenever you hit the turn indicator, it instantly pulls up the camera for your right or your
Yeah,
left side, which is actually in many ways better than looking at the mirror.
yeah,
But I'm not a fan because it takes my eyes off of the road.
yeah. Because
So
you have to look at the center console,
yeah,
right? Which to me, I like the big screen and everything like that, but I think having no displays in front of you is always a problem to me. Or just like a heads up display would be cool for the
a heads up
basic.
display would be good because you could still kind of keep your eye on the roads. I there's two things that happen. One, you're breaking your line of sight because you're looking like this. Everything's kind of in about the same place for your field of view, but you're going from this cone view to this cone view while
Yeah,
you're doing 60. Like your eyes are still going to have to capture what's going on. You have a reaction time that's there. You're going to
yeah.
have to look at the screen, which is always different than reality. So, um, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's fine and you'll get used to it, but it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, it's a weird in between thing. Like if somebody were gonna give me one, I would be like, yeah, cool, this will be fun. But I think I would get frustrated with a lot of it if I had to drive it for any practical purpose.
Mhm.
Uh, and that to me like puts it in a weird place because one of the reasons that we have a pickup because pickups aren't cheap to buy, they're not cheap to own. You know, it's like I get 19 miles to the gallon on the highway if I'm lucky, and and then it's an 18-gallon tank.
Hmm.
So, you know, when gas prices are up, it can cost me $100 to fill the tank.
Oh yeah,
And so it's not cost efficient to own a pickup, but you own the pickup
for a purpose.
because even if you aren't somebody who works at a construction site or uses your pickup for as like a work vehicle,
Hmm.
still there are so many times when you need to go to Home Depot or you want to bring home a piece of furniture or you know whatever it is.
Or your family wants to borrow
Yeah,
it.
I just it for me made sense to have a pickup. And the pickup is less practical in a lot of ways. Now, the Cybertruck seems like the opposite of that. It's like a cool looking thing that has pickup like features.
But you don't really get the extra tangibles.
Yeah, but using it as a pickup would probably be a huge pain in the rear end. Um,
I could see that, but of course, I we're gonna see a YouTube video come out a year from now. Is like how like my life using the Cybertruck as a pickup for a year.
yeah, as a work pickup or
Yeah.
something like that.
Oh, it's coming.
What I what I want to know in practical purposes is who is this vehicle for? It's not for soccer moms. It's
It's
way
not
too
for
big for
workers.
that. It's not for on the job type guys who either have a mobile plumbing, they do plumbing, and so they need a vehicle that can haul their tools, or they work construction, so they need to be able to haul things around. It's not for that.
I'm gonna buy one to start a lawn mowing business.
And that lawn mowing content on YouTube and TikTok is hot.
My kids told me that. I'm like, that's what I did before I joined the military. Like that 2-year gap from when I graduated high school when I was 15 and I had to pay for college, I was mowing like 12 yards a week. I
Yeah,
was like a yard mowing fool. And now my kids are like, "Oh yeah, I'm just watching these videos. They're like, can you go mow our yard and make a
yeah,
video about that? Because our yard needs to be mowed, and you're watching yard mowing videos."
yeah. It's pretty interesting. I think I first saw him on TikTok, and there's the one guy that I've seen the most. I think his channel is called SB Mowing. He goes places and finds houses that their yards are super overgrown. Maybe the house is vacant, or the person who lives in it is old and can't afford to keep their lawn up. And then he just like goes at it. And there's just something so satisfying about watching people edge a sidewalk.
Oh, I was good at it. Like I would use a weed eater to edge and to weed eat sometimes to like for
Yeah,
cleanup areas because you can get some RPMs on those little strings. But yeah, it's crazy to me. It's like I see these games on Steam now. It's like Lawn Mowing Simulator 2023 or
yeah,
like Goat Simulator or Truck Driver Simulator. I'm like, why don't you? Why? Why
yeah,
is this a game?
yeah. It's very strange to me, especially like the truck driving ones, where
Yeah.
you're a semi truck driver,
Dude, I've
and
seen a video of this guy who built like an entire big rig console in his living room.
I saw that too. I think, yeah, and I mean, everybody's got to have a hobby, I guess, but man, it's weird, and I have a feeling that the people who are going to buy a Cybertruck are people who never ever would buy another truck, and it's going to be youngish people, nerdy, techie people.
Or tech enthusiasts. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Tesla enthusiasts like my wife.
yeah.
Like she's all about it. I reserved the Tesla Cybertruck for her, not
Oh,
for me. So she has, I mean, she hasn't made a video in like 3 months because we've been dealing with a lot of family stuff here and she's
right.
been working more. But she's got like 5 videos on the back burner. But it's funny because she went from driving like not nice cars. I mean, not anything against my wife or her
Right.
bad taste in cars, but so she had a 2012 Mazda 2.
Mm,
And we bought that because she decided she wanted to quit making sandwiches and wanted to go do x-rays for a living.
okay.
So she went in, back, put her through school. She went through radiological technologist school. So she does x-ray.
Right.
She's very good at it. And she got some income of her own. And she said, I want to buy my own car.
Right.
And she was looking and looking and looking, and she really wanted a Tesla. And that was what she had gotten drawn to because she loved the EV concept. She liked how she believed it was better for the environment. It's her own belief, which you can go either way with that. But she really wanted it.
Yeah.
And she was like, she was going to cheap out and get like a Mazda 5 or something. I'm like, look, if that's what you want, I support you. Go get it. So she was so happy she bought it. We waited our 5 months for it to show up. And she fell in love with it and then started making videos. And for my wife to do anything that requires sitting in front of a camera and talking is crazy.
Right. Yeah.
But she's all about that. And I think that 90% of the people that go buy these the first year will be those Tesla people.
Yeah. But even the cheapest model, I think, is still over 60 grand.
After everything, probably. I was looking at it because when I reserved it, it was originally going to be like 39.9 or like 41.9. I can't remember what it was, and now it starts off at like, is it 50?
Yeah, I can't remember. I know that I think the 3-motor model, that's the top end, is 100, and then the next one down is
79.9. Yeah, and I think it might be. Let me look. I'll find it real quick. But when I reserved it, it was supposed to be 39.9. And I was like, that's fine. Because it's right about lines up because my wife has about a year and a half left to pay off her Tesla. So what we're going to do with the Model 3 she has is just let our kids drive it. And then she's just going to get the Cybertruck and just get a new loan. Yeah. So let me see what single motor Cybertruck is now.
So one of the things that I have been curious about with the proliferation of electric cars, and I think electric cars are cool. I've had a Prius. I've had, so plug-in hybrids. I've had, like right now, my wife has a BMW 3 Series, the 330e, that's a plug-in hybrid. I like the idea of electric cars, and they're actually really fun to drive because what people don't understand is that when you have an internal combustion engine, you have to have like a whole chemical reaction thing going on before you get any kind of power.
Yeah, people call it power lag.
Yeah, so when you are driving an electric car, it's just instant torque,
instantaneous,
right? And you put your foot down and it spins the motor.
And I actually have a story about that. There was somebody who almost killed a bunch of people here a few months ago because they just got in a new Tesla and they weren't used to driving it yet. And I think they goosed it a little bit and it went up over the curb and smashed into the side of a donut shop. And they almost hit like 3 people.
Yeah. And if you can imagine, like, if you're somebody who is new to driving or whatever, or you just, you make a mistake or you get flustered or something like that. How many times have you accidentally I got to hit the brake, but you accidentally hit the gas? If you accidentally hit the gas in an emergency type situation in an electric vehicle, the chances
you could be 100 yards down the road already.
Yeah. Tesla has all those different modes, and really what the modes do is they just ramp down the amount of torque available.
Yeah, they dampen the power. Yeah. And you've got chill mode, you've got sport, I guess it's sport mode. There's like 2 or 3 different modes.
Right. Right.
But there's a big difference. But yeah, it's everybody, I guess, has got comfortable with saying power on demand, but it's just instantaneous get up and go. Yeah. And it's not like when you're sitting at the traffic stop with your Honda Civic and you've got a close distance you got to make, and you see the cars coming and you gun it and it's like, and then it goes.
Yeah.
No, this one you touch it and you're
going. Yeah. The Chevy Volt that I had was so much fun to drive because that car was built to have sort of a cockpit type feel, and so you're sort of like, you're sort of stuck in there in that kind of environment, and then you just press you can beat anything off the line. If you're sitting at a traffic stop and a freaking Ferrari comes up beside you, you can beat the Ferrari off the line. The Ferrari's going to catch up with you in about 3 or 4 seconds, but
you'll beat it off the line.
Yeah. And get, maybe a car length or 2 ahead of it before it really kicks in, and then you're done. But I think they're very fun. And I think that it just makes sense that we're going away from fossil fuel vehicles to something that, is not as destructive in the same way as mining oil and that kind of thing. We're looking at different kinds of
Environmental
environmental
impact.
impacts, right? And neither one of them are particularly good, but with our history of 120 something years of fossil fuel usage, the supply is not going to last, and the damage that's done to the environment is not good. So I think we're going that direction. What is it, 2035? That in California,
Yeah.
all vehicles have to be electric by 2035 in California.
But it's crazy because there's a lot of other things that people don't think about. And one thing I did look, the price for the new single wheel drive Tesla, it went from 39,900 to now it will start at 60,990. So we're basically looking at $21,000 price increase.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not paying $60,000 for that. I would have paid 39, or my wife would have paid 39. But here's the thing. So electric vehicles, they're great. They get great charging capabilities. You don't have to buy gas, all that stuff. Most people charge them at home. Well, California is going all new. No, only electric vehicles can be sold by 2035. What happens in California all the time?
Uh, Power outages.
Power outages,
Yeah.
and also like power restrictions.
Yeah.
So like what's going to happen when we're still having these rolling blackouts and power outages in California, and they're like, oh, by the way, we control your electric meters, so we've determined that you can't charge your car, between the hours of such and such because it's too taxing on the grid, or it's off charging time for the environment, and you're like, but I got to charge to go somewhere.
I mean, you would hope that by then a lot of states are offering incentives to go, at least offload some of the electrical grid strain with solar power. Like I know that here in Iowa, they're just starting to have some of those programs to give you rebates or some kind of deal on going solar. So you would have to think, especially in a place like California, that by that time people will have had plenty of opportunity to retrofit and use solar as at least part of their electric footprint, right? And but it is strange. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the oil crisis in
The
the
gas shortages.
in the mid 70s, when I remember Saturday morning cartoons, one of the commercials that would come on would be like whether or not there was gas and where it was.
Well, they had rations back then too.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could only get so much, and most of the cars, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we went to smaller cars with smaller engines and and more efficient
Well,
unleaded
that's
gas,
That's why we got the four-cylinder Mustang and the 1986 5.0 V8 that pushed 165 horsepower.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that if you're a younger person, like younger than probably 40, then you won't remember what cars were like before oil shortages and before there was a push toward more economic uh, usage of gas and taking the lead out of gas and all of that kind of stuff. Unleaded gas has been the norm now for what,
40
like
years.
30, 40 years. Yeah, and back in the old days, it was like super cheap and the V8 engines and in like so many cars, V8 engines that were pushing like 360 horsepower.
Oh yeah, well, to my knowledge though, leaded gas is actually better.
Yeah,
But the problem is the byproduct of the pollution is lead.
yeah,
Also, it builds up too. Like it's not good for the engine long term. But anyway, yeah.
yeah. So it's gonna be interesting to see. There are tons of opportunities for other modes of transportation. Light rail in some areas could really make sense. And but the thing about Americans is we want our cars, right?
Well, we did. The thing is now is like I have a second son. I mean, I have five, but my second oldest son, he turned 17 yesterday. My oldest son will be 18 in March. And a lot of kids I'm finding as I'm talking to my siblings and other parents, our kids don't want to drive anymore.
Yeah.
Like my son, like, I don't want a license. Why do I want to drive? Why can't you just drive me? I can't play on my phone while I'm driving.
Yeah.
It's like kids don't
It,
want to drive anymore.
it is. It has like changed. I know my daughter got her driver's license a little bit late, but we wanted her to take driver's ed and to well, I think in Iowa they make you take driver's ed or it's somehow incentivized by insurance. But you can take driver's ed, and then at the end of a driver's ed course, they'll give you your license. Um,
Yeah, basically. So in Texas, you don't have to take driver's ed. You can go just take the driving tests at the
yeah,
DMV or DPS. Um, but you don't, generally that's not a good idea because you don't know the rules of the road and you don't get the insurance rebate. You're probably less safe driving. And we have driving schools like that here, or we have the parent taught ones where
yeah,
they do the curriculum online and then the parent takes them out to meet these driving objectives, which is what we've done with our two kids. Um, Oddly enough, my third oldest son turned 15 today and will be getting his permit, so we'll have another driver. But yeah, once you complete that course, you get a piece of paper that says you've satisfied the requirements. You go to the DMV at DPS. I know it changed to DPS like 25 years ago, but we still all call it the DMV.
it's still DMV out here. So I think some places go one way or the other, but yeah, we still call it DMV. But
But you just take it over there, and then they're like, "Here's your license," and you get your insurance rebate.
yeah, this but you're right. Kids aren't learning to drive, and they don't have the desire. I know that when I was young, getting your license was a rite of passage, and
Yeah,
it was also an opportunity to have a little bit more freedom of range. You could like drive places instead of just being stuck in your neighborhood or getting a ride from mom or dad.
or hey,
And
can I go to Timmy's house? And they're like, I don't want to drive you over there. It's
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And as a parent, it's nice when your kids get that liberty because then they can go to the grocery store for you.
yeah, yeah. It's it. So you might be right. There are again like so many opportunities for different kinds of transport and different kinds of there are different ways to skin the cat of transportation. Um, and maybe the idea that Americans are like sort of really attached to their cars is on the way out. I don't know. I mean, I know that I still enjoy my cars. I still enjoy the shopping process. I still enjoy learning about it. I still enjoy like, I don't necessarily enjoy like changing the oil.
I think there's a lot less. I think there's been a decline in the romanticism with the American dream and cars because not only do our up and coming generation don't want to drive, but
Right.
two, we don't want to commute to go back and forth to work anymore.
Yeah.
There's been like a decentralization of the work economies. More people are working home, and it's like there seems to be a movement to embrace introvertism again.
Yeah, or at least, like you said, a sort of decentralized workplace,
Mhm.
which I think one of the benefits that came out of having to work from home, for many people from in the pandemic, is that you get more quality time with your family, and you
Mhm.
start to realize like how much time you are wasting in commute time, in just all of the different you're having to be someplace that for 8 hours when maybe you only have to do 4 hours worth of work. There are two kinds of jobs, and firemen and policemen. Firemen are paid to be there when they're needed, and policemen are paid to be there all the time.
Mhm.
So that there are two kinds of jobs, and if you're a fireman, then you can come to the fire from anywhere, right? If you're a policeman, maybe it's a little bit different. You have to walk your beat. But
Mhm.
I think that people realize that there are a lot more fireman jobs
The police
that
jobs.
than we had traditionally recognized as such.
Yeah.
And so I
Unless
think
fire
that
departments start driving around proactively spraying waters on houses.
yeah, yeah. I mean, in California, they might, they just so, but it's one of those things where I do think that there's a sea change happening, and the pandemic just just made it go faster. I think that people adopted technologies that were there but weren't really being developed as quickly as they could be because not everybody was sort of forced into using them. The telecommunication software. I mean, we're sitting here using a web portal to look at each other and talk to one another and record it at the same time. And we could be
Well,
live as well if we wanted to, you know. And this stuff kind of existed,
mhm.
but as the pandemic went, these things got much more advanced and the quality got you got much more quality and it was much easier to do. Um, and I don't think it would have developed as quickly or become so ubiquitous had we not had some sea change moment that made us adapt.
Well, the big thing was not so much that people didn't want to work from home. It was the businesses would not allow you to work from home. It
Right.
was the same traditional philosophy. Everybody comes to the office. Like there was in some realms, there was a because when I first started working at the law firm I was at, they're like, look, in case of an emergency or your kid's sick or something like that, you can work from home maybe one day every once in a while, like no big deal. But like we don't work from home. So everybody was forced to go work from home, and that kind of took the power away from a lot of these businesses. And then people did realize, hey, I'm not spending 3 hours in my car a day. I don't have a mandatory lunch break. I'm not spending $400 or $500 a
Yeah.
month on gas. I'm not riding a train to work every day. I'm here when my kid gets off the bus,
Yeah.
and
Or
I can do the work from home.
I remember hearing a story about State Farm Insurance a few months ago during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. Lots of people for State Farm had been working from home and doing their jobs, and it was totally doable from home. And so, coming out of the pandemic, State Farm decided they weren't going to require people to come back to the office.
Mhm.
They were going to allow people to work from home, and it didn't matter where they were as long as they were available to do their job and meetings or whatever. But then they got a new CEO, and the new CEO was like, nope, cancel that. Everybody's got to come back to the office. In the meantime, people had sort of taken that new idea of like, I don't have to be within 30 minutes drive of my office
And it
anymore.
moved hours away.
I can move to the town in Arizona where my grandkids live or where my daughter's going to college and still work from there. So yeah, people had made plans for their lives without the requirement for being regionally close to where they had to work. And so there was a big kerfuffle about that. And I don't it was in the midst of being sort of worked through. I don't know how it came out, but I think that that's the kind of thing that we're going to have to deal with, you know, as time goes on. People aren't going to want to people aren't I, once the Pandora's box is open
You can't close it.
and you know that you can like do your work in your sweatpants, it's really difficult to be like, hey, you got to put the khakis back on and the uncomfortable loafers and tuck in your shirt and come
Work
back to
well,
work.
yeah.
You know, like it's just not going to happen.
It's difficult, but
Yeah,
so all right, Cybertruck. I know we have questions. I'm sure we'll
yeah.
get answers from all the Tesla community. Maybe I'll have my wife come on the podcast maybe one week and she can talk to us about
I I think that what we're going to find as more Cybertrucks get delivered is that
their problems with them.
yeah, and I mean not necessarily. There's always been build quality problems with Tesla, you know, panel gaps and all that kind of stuff are not always 100% what they would be in terms of tolerances from a manufacturer that's been making cars for a long time. Um, so what's going to happen with the Cybertruck? I mean, everything on the Cybertruck is electronic. If you
Mm.
want to open up the frunk, it's an electronic opening. If you
Well, I
want to,
mean, if you take a look at what we have with Teslas now, I mean, they probably call it the Carl's neural network, the nervous system, because everything is connected. It's all battery and electronic now.
right,
Most of that stuff, that DNA is still going to be there. They've been doing this for like a decade now, but where they run into problems is a lot of quality control. Like, oh, the panel gap is off. This window is off. This like there's a gap in this, or the like mine, the molding, the little wooden molding that's glued on is peeling off on mine. It's like it's like the little things. And
Right.
then every once in a while you might have a catastrophic issue, but at least they have the underlying setup where like they'll come pick your car up on a flatbed and take it to
Yeah.
the service center for you.
Yeah. It's not like it's already hard to fix your own car when you're talking about an internal combustion engine. Like when the computer goes out on your Tesla, like if you lock up the computer and it just won't do anything, like it's a brick,
Yeah.
you know.
I
And
wonder, I've never done that, but I wonder if you were to lock up the computer, if it would have like a sad face or be like, uh-oh.
yeah, or like when you turned on the old Macs and like something was wrong and it couldn't find the boot disk, it would just have like the little Mac with the sad face on it.
Yeah.
But
Oh, goodness.
yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out
And
because I don't see it, as I said, I don't see it as a practical vehicle, and it feels like a stretch for a lot of people to be just like, hey, this is a fun purchase for me.
it serves basically one or two categories. Because when you look at truck ownership, there's typically three categories. There's the I can't afford a big truck, but I need one, so I just buy whatever I can afford and just keep piecemealing it together.
Right.
There's the business truck, and they get a new one every 2 years after they put like 80,000 miles on it. And then there's that mid category where people buy like Ford Raptors just because they want to have a cool looking truck.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll have people like that who buy these, which I mean, I'm not trying to like put down any category or group. I'm just saying, as a generational truck owner, these are the people that buy trucks.
Yeah.
uh, and there will be the Tesla EV enthusiasts that will buy it. So I think there's really two groups of people, but I mean, one, production will not be that high starting off. Two, it is the 100,000 model that's starting off. So I think maybe we'll have a little bit more everyman conversation once these trickle out in about 5 years. But that's kind of, it's funny because for the longest time, even like the EV haters and the Prius drivers were anti-truck, and now we have a like EV trucks. So it's kind
Yeah.
of funny to me.
Yeah. And the thing about talking about sort of the, I don't know, show trucks, I guess you would, for lack of a better word, the Raptors and I mean, all of the high end trucks that you go out and look on car lots, and they're like 75,000 plus
Hmm.
dollars, right? Some Fords and Chevys will be up over $100,000 for, like the
King
top
Ranch
trim level
dually.
with all of the stuff, right?
Hmm.
And those cars right now are not selling.
No,
They are sitting on those lots, and they are just not selling. And it's interesting to see something like the Cybertruck come out in a car market where interest rates are terrible
oh, they
and
are.
car prices are inflated because
And car insurance prices have doubled.
yeah, and first we had scarcity of parts, and now like parts have become more expensive. So there's all kinds of reasons that these prices have climbed up. And it's probably part of the reason why the Cybertruck went from 39K to 59K, right?
Hmm.
So we're in a bear market for consumers in the sense that everything is more expensive, and the cost of borrowing money is
Well,
much more expensive
the
than it
cost
used
of
to be.
everything is more expensive.
Yeah,
So it's like not only are we hammered with interest rates and inflation, and the supply chain has basically increased the cost of everything. Everything's just more expensive. I mean,
yeah,
so it comes into the market at a really bad time. But the thing is there's always people who will be able to afford this stuff, and they will be the ones that will adopt them first, which is fine. I mean,
yeah,
like I said, this is not punitive towards any toward. It was just the reality of the matter of who's going to buy them.
yeah, yeah. It's just in a time period where buying a car is very difficult. Buying a house is very difficult.
The one thing
And
I will give them though is one, I think they know their demand pretty well. And the demand is high right now for the initial launch. But the thing is they've also decentralized the car buying process because you don't have these dealerships, you're not doing test drives, you don't have all the infrastructure. You
right,
put your reserve in, you get your loan, you pay for it, and then they're like, okay, we're building your truck. It'll be here in 6 months.
right, Right.
So I think they do offset some of that liability where you're not driving by a CarMax and you see 5,000 cars out there unsold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. The overhead is much lower for the business model that Tesla has. They're kind of building cars on demand to a certain extent.
Hmm.
And so they already know that the money is gonna be there for that particular vehicle by the time they finish making it, which is a different kind of way to do it. You know, we didn't talk about stainless steel as a material, but that too could be problematic. Uh, I keep thinking about John DeLorean and the
Hey, but whenever
DeLorean.
those things hit 88 miles per hour, you can travel in time, though.
I know. The DeLorean has a soft place in most of our hearts because of the Back to the Future movies. However, the DeLorean as a car
Was crap.
was an absolute failure, and it was not a good car. It did not go fast. It was not nice to drive.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. You remember in the Back to the Future, and Marty comes up. He's like, "You got a DeLorean, Doc?"
Yeah,
It's like a DeLorean,
yeah,
like. But the movie made the DeLorean cool. But when they started recording that video, the DeLorean was not cool.
yeah. And the thing is, the DeLorean always looked cool,
Mhm.
right? And maybe this is why I equate the Cybertruck and the DeLorean in my mind. Is the DeLorean always looked cool, but the reality of the DeLorean was not nowhere near as cool as what it looked like. And I wonder, like, is that going to be the case with the Cybertruck to some extent? It looks cool, but is ultimately like really impractical and not nearly as satisfying or good a driving experience.
You know what would
Um,
have been cool though is if, like, as an homage, somehow I know that 1.21 gigawatts is gigawatts is a ton of electricity, but
yeah,
if they had like a sticker in there somewhere, or something that, or
yeah, or
if
or they just had a screensaver for the screen that had like the little
flux capacitor
flux
or something,
capacitor in
like
there.
when you
Yeah,
hit, like if you hit 88 miles per hour, the screen turns into a flux capacitor.
yeah,
That'd be pretty
yeah.
neat.
But the other thing we're going to talk about, and maybe we don't have time to talk about it too much right now, is kind of like we're wrapping up the year. Uh,
Pun intended.
w- yeah, this is the 1st of December as we record this, and so we've got 1 month left of 2023.
That's
And
crazy.
so, what has the year been in tech in 2023? My question is we've a lot of people are talking about how tech has slowed down and there's not as much like new products that are doing different things. It's more iteration on existing stuff. How has 2023 been as a year for tech? Have people gotten excited about things? Is there something that happened this year that really got people excited about tech? Or has it been more of a I guess keeping pace kind of marking time year with technology? What do you think?
I think that maybe this would be a great topic for next week because I we could spend an hour talking about this.
Yeah,
But like the Cliff Notes synopsis, 2023 electronics for dummies. I think three things have happened. One, we've had some exciting new form factors that have come out. Like we were talking about this before the show, the OnePlus Open has really done a number, and really I think has been the most exciting phone of the year.
yep,
Um, People didn't see it coming, came out of left field, turned out to be an amazing phone, and it's really competitive. So that's cool. We now have, I mean, we have three full size foldables in the US now: the Google Pixel Fold, the Z Fold, and the Open.
yep,
So that's cool. Another thing is warranties. You look
mm,
at what Google Pixel is pushing the boundary with that now, 7 and 7, not Seagrams with Sprite or anything. We're talking
yeah,
7 Up. We're talking about the 7 years of operating system update promise and 7 years of security patches.
yeah,
So that's going to drive things further because Samsung's not going to sit on their laurels and be like, well, we
right,
got one up. We were 4 years and 5. But the reality is a lot of these phones, I think, have demonstrated they can go the distance.
yeah,
Like, I think a Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 S23 Ultra will be perfectly fine for 4 to 5 years.
yeah, Yeah.
And that's that's a huge accomplishment to be able to say that.
Yeah.
And I do think that AI has really kind of fallen a little flat. Like everybody's acting like it's the new best big thing, but really the practical application isn't there yet for day to day usage.
Yeah, I mean, AI kind of came out of the gate in early 2023 as like the it tech,
Hmm.
right? And ChatGPT and all the other permutations of that were really cool. But I think once the new car smell wore off, I don't know if the adoption rate of using AI in your daily workflow really has become all that much. In terms of like, yes, AI exists probably in all of our devices on some level of
And it does. I mean,
complexity,
yeah,
but using AI as a tool in the work that you do, I think that people recognize the potential,
potential.
but then now we've got this sort of time that we have to wait for that potential. You have to cross the barrier of, um, I guess, for lack of a better word, is like the uncanny valley. Like
Mhm.
AI actually has to become like a responsive like organism. So if you're going to use AI and you want to use it for your work, AI has to work alongside of you as though it were a coworker, as opposed
Well,
to like having to think of like, well, what's the exact right prompt that I can put in here for AI to spit out the thing that I want?
you're basically programming responses to questions,
Yeah,
and so it's predictive based on models. So they're like, okay, I've given you the ingredients to make this cake. Now make me this cake. And it
yeah,
just cuts out you having to go through pouring the flour in the bowl and
yeah,
mixing the eggs. So like we're getting there, but I think it reminds me a lot of 5G. Like 5G was like, "Oh my gosh, it's revolutionary, it's amazing." And here we are like it's still not as amazing as it was
yeah. We're
promised.
2017, I believe, was the first year that 5G modems were in flagship phones.
Yeah, so I think the promise is there. I think it's going to be amazing. We're at the very, very beginning of this AI revolution stuff. But I think the way that it was carted out as a marketing tool was a little bit cart before the horse.
Yeah, yeah, and I I have adopted some AI tools in what I do for my channel. I use AI tools to, cut up the podcast into shorts. And, I just have to like upload the podcast and tell it, sort of a few parameters for how long I want the thing to be and what platform I want it to be formatted for, et cetera, et cetera. And then it'll spit out, you know, 10 or 20 little 30 to 1 minute, 30-second to 1 minute shorts
Hmm.
that I can then use. And that's great. What I really need is for it to be able to recognize contextually, like, the conversation that's being had, and then, like, edit it as though it were editing it,
Hmm.
and it's not quite there
Well,
yet.
there's a lot of stuff. Like you see all these photos, people use them to make their thumbnails, people use them to try and generate topics for videos.
Yeah,
There's a lot of ways, but it's still very, very, and AI is and until it's contextually responsive will always require input,
yeah,
like because you want a desired result, you have to give it the roadmap to get there.
right. Yeah,
But until it's truly more contextually aware, and then it's like, oh, would you like me to do this for you? And
yeah.
you're like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
It's sort of like, remember Clippy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Clippy.
So it's sort of like what I want is a Clippy that pops up in my computer and is actually useful, you
I
know?
think Windows wanted that too in 1995.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Clippy was like, "It looks like you're trying to create a letter. Do you want me to help you with that?" And then it would give you, like, some terrible template, you know?
Well,
And yeah,
yeah, so that was the second part, and then the third thing that I think this year was people have started realizing that $500 phones are really good. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of mid-range flagship chip from last year phones. Like, you take a look at like the Think phone,
right,
and the Think phone, fantastic phone. You can go pick it up, I think, still for 399. But you look like the Moto Edge phone. You look at the Nothing phone. You look at even what OnePlus is doing with having like a $600 flagship. There's a lot people realize like, look, We can get really good phones that have very capable cameras, that have
Yeah.
nice screens, and we don't have to spend $1,100.
Yeah. Yeah. And meanwhile, I think you could also say that for some phones that are flagship phones and demand flagship prices, like, so I've been using my iPhone 12 Pro or 15 Pro Max now since launch day. So that's probably what, like 3
3
months
months?
or
Yeah, but
so, give or take. And I know that I haven't even like scratched the surface of some of the capabilities that the phone has, especially in the camera.
mhm.
And I think now with these flagship phones, we're going from a place where, okay, the phone camera is enough to sort of ditch the point and shoot. But now the phone camera is getting to the point where
It's a
it
focal point. It's like you want that instead of a DSLR.
yeah. And I think the capabilities of for video, the capabilities now that you can shoot in log on an iPhone and you
Record
can
straight to a syncing SSD. It's crazy.
yeah, so there's a lot of possibilities there that didn't really exist before, and I think it's gonna take people a little while to sort of wake up to, like, what their phones can potentially do, and
Well, that reminds me of all the infighting we had a few weeks ago when Apple showed off that they shot all that event with their iPhone, and
yeah,
everyone's like, "Oh, but they use professional lighting." I'm like, "Why wouldn't you use professional lighting with a regular camera?" Like,
yeah, it that's the thing, like, if you had an FX3 and you were shooting everything on a Sony like a handful of Sony FX3s, I mean, those are cinema cameras, they're not the most expensive cinema cameras in the world, but they do a really good job.
mhm.
Like, are you gonna go out with an FX3 and not light the scene? No.
No, no,
I
no, you're
mean,
not. You're just gonna use the built-in microphone to that's what Christopher Nolan does.
yeah. No, it's it makes sense to use lighting, and so
They're like, "Oh, they put it in a rig that has vibration dampeners, and it has a muffler, like a little thing on the
gyroscope,
microphone,
yeah,
so it
yeah.
doesn't pick up the wind noise." Well, yeah, they paid $1,000,000 to make this video.
Yeah, it's I think that people who complained about that were missing the point. They were missing the point that with the level of quality and the software that's available and the potential for being able to use professional features that to this point haven't really been available on smartphones. Shooting in a log profile that you could then go back and really like work with the colors and have all the dynamic range that you wanted. Like
Oh,
so,
yeah, apply
I
your own LUT, color grade it, all sorts of
yeah,
like, there's so much stuff you can do, and it's funny because I I do think it is changing the industry a little bit. I was talking to Jaime Rivera the other day, and he's like, "I'm starting to try and shoot some of my stuff with an iPhone because it's just good and it's convenient,
yeah,
and I don't have to lug this stuff around anymore." And I'm like, "Hey, man, I've been using smartphones to record all my videos for years."
yeah, yeah.
It
Whenever I do any kind of like away from the desk B-roll, yeah, it's all iPhone, and it's because I'm not. Most of my cameras are locked down. Like I've got an overhead camera, I've got this A camera right here. It's a pain to if you're a one man show, it's a pain to like take your camera off of where you've got it set up, take out the dummy battery, put in a real battery, then start like it. If you just got your phone and you start carrying it around, and you're just like,
Ka-chow.
so
Yeah.
I just think that stuff has matured to the point where stuff that probably would have been a sacrifice at $500 in years past now
It was an amazing
are
deal.
are as good as what we had 4 to 5 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago even,
Mhm.
right? And the flagship phones are becoming good enough that you almost want them to be real tools.
And they're starting to be that. I mean, I've actually changed up my workflow with what I've been doing. So I've been using an iPhone to record the iPhone selfie camera for the last 3 years, record my videos.
Yeah.
My last two videos, I switched over. I'm using a Sony Xperia 1 Mark V, which I love this phone for all sorts of different reasons. But Sony Xperia 1 Mark V, here's my rig. It goes on the back here. There's a Sony screen monitor that plugs into the back of it. I have a shotgun mic that plugs into the headphone jack,
Right.
and then it's like a shooting rig. I mean, this is some serious hardware, and it's a
Yeah.
smartphone.
Yeah, I know. I watched a video about the Xperia, like that phone, from an audio standpoint too, and that phone is leaps and bounds ahead of what a lot of other phones are in terms of the audio. And I watched, in fact, I think I might have seen somebody do this before, but it didn't really sink in. But I've got my Apple Watch Ultra, right? And you can use the Apple Watch as a as
This
a
remote shutter.
as a remote shutter and as a monitor for your iPhone cameras, right?
Mhm.
But the thing that I saw was the person had the Apple Watch Ultra wrapped around the phone,
Yeah, I've done that before. It's pretty neat.
and then just it was acting as a remote shutter and as a monitor, so you could frame yourself.
Yes.
And to me, that's like one step away from you don't need to like you don't need to buy specialty gear.
Well, when you take a look at the iPhone, like the selfie cameras, like they lack the depth, they lack a lot of the sophistication, they lack a lot of the stabilization and things like that. They're innately, it's a very small sensor.
Yeah,
So people look at it and they go, oh, yeah, it looks okay. But if you switch around and use the primary camera on an iPhone, it shoots some darn good video and you
yeah,
get all those features back. So I did that once or twice before. And there were reasons I think the screen kept turning off and it kept having to unlock it. Like it was kind of annoying.
yeah,
But for the just to like frame it and having a big screen on like the 39 millimeter Apple Watch Ultra, yeah, you could realistically do that. You wrap it around. I did that and hit the record button, and you can instantly elevate your recording capabilities.
yeah, yeah. And I'd listen to a lot of podcasts or watch a lot of videos about YouTube how-to stuff, like how to get, like, what should you start out with and all those kinds of things, because I'm always interested in what other people are using. And before, people would say, hey, it's okay to start out on your phone will be fine. And I remember El Jefe Reviews way back when his initial camera setup was a Samsung Galaxy S8 that he wanted to use the main cameras, so he set up a mirror
Yeah.
behind the phone so that he could sit there and be able to frame himself and see himself and film himself with those better things, and it was good enough. Most people wouldn't know. So it was fine. And then there was like in the ensuing years, it was kind of like, okay, so now Sony has come out with so many different cameras that are more focused toward video than they ever were before,
Hmm.
and other camera companies have followed suit. But I went from using a $2,000 camera body to an $800 camera body and spending more money on lenses
Hmm.
because
Lenses make the shot.
yeah, and it's not necessary to spend $10,000 to get a really good product out of these cameras. And so I think as the iPhone goes, as I still think Samsung and Google have some catching up to do on the video front, but it's almost like we went out and now we're going to come back, and the smartphone will be the only thing that you need.
Well, that's what we've been able to do, and like that's one of the things a lot of people don't realize. So I talk about the Xperia One Mark V. It's the only camera that has a actual true continuous zoom lens.
Right,
So the mid-range lens, it's like 3.5 times to 5.2. It's like 85 to 125 millimeter.
right,
They have some like weird magnets in the glass in there, but it works like a true zoom lens.
yeah,
It's not filling in the gaps with digital. Like what
right,
you get with the iPhone, you go from a 1 times to the 3 times to 2 times digital.
right,
Like they're fixed. So we'll see more of that stuff start to come off. But we're starting to get more dedicated sensors. These 3 millimeter chips or nanometer chips we've got now, like everything as far as scalability has started
yeah,
shrinking down to make more portable platforms like this possible.
yeah. And I think that's a good place to stop for today, because the one thing I want to cover next week, uh, some of the things that we've seen in tech, some more of the things that we've seen in tech this year that have both been good and maybe not so good. But then also, I want to talk about where we're going in tech in the coming year, because we've got some big items
Apple
that
Vision Plus is January, right?
yeah, Apple Vision Pros is January. I don't know if they'll hit that, but it'll be very interesting to see. I know that conventional wisdom on Vision Pro right now is like, I don't see why I would need it.
I know you're going to buy it.
I definitely want to. I definitely want to. But the one thing that makes me nervous is that you have to be fitted for it and all this different stuff. And I would have to have lenses made. And so like the $3,500 price tag might turn into a $4,500 price tag, which makes me nervous.
I'm weird about these things, but the nice thing is, like, normally if it were $1,500, I'd be like, sign me up.
Yeah.
But that basically, after, like, as it is right now, like, what, 35, 36, and then tax, it's gonna be $4,000 minimal.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here like, $4,000, first generation product. I'm probably not going, like beginning of the year, like I got property taxes, I got school taxes, I got like trips. I'm probably not gonna. We can record this later. Like we'll have a live stream after it comes out, and I'm like, so I bought one, and then like, hold on, let me replay this video from
Yeah,
Adam
exactly.
on December 1st.
This is at 1 hour and 16 minutes flat. Adam says no, he's not going to get it. But,
So who
but
knows?
I do want to talk about that and kind of, is there like a new front, like another growth year coming for tech? Because tech has
Are
been generally kind of flat.
are we going to go out west for the new technology?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of tech creators have felt the constriction, not as many views, not as many products, not, are we going to see a resurgence, as we get more and more time away from the pandemic and maybe prices come down and the economies improve and that kind of thing. So those are things that we can talk about next week and dig into a little bit deeper.
So that means show up next week for some great, not that we don't always have great discussion, but there's going to be some really great discussion next week.
Yeah, I think we talked about the Cybertruck longer than I thought we would, but I think there's a lot to talk about there. And it's not just whether or not the Cybertruck sucks, but it's, what does this proliferation of more electric vehicles actually mean? So,
Well, and just as an exiting statement, like, we don't want the Cybertruck to suck. And I don't think the Cybertruck does suck, but I mean, this is the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. We're going to have reasonable, practical conversations about things. This is not a fanboy channel.
yeah. Yeah. And, I always call people out and call out products when I feel like it's necessary to call them out. And the Cybertruck, I think there are just a lot of questions. So we're going to see how that works out over time. But the same's true for Vision Pro. The Vision Pro has to prove its concept pretty convincingly early on, even if it's not a product that's meant for mass consumer adoption.
Well, Samsung is supposed to be coming out with something similar as well that I've heard about recently. They're going to have some sort of their own headset. But anyway, we'll talk about this next week.
Yeah. Come back next week when we'll talk about the stuff that we said we'd talk about this week.
Yes.
And have a good rest of the week. Once again, this has been the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast with me, Jason T. Lewis, and of course, Adam J. Matlock, the Tech Odyssey. We'll be back again next week, probably a little bit sooner than we were this week, but, holiday travel and all that. And we'll talk about all that, what's going on in tech at the end of this year into next year. So thanks again for being here. Like, subscribe, bell notify, find us on your podcast purveyor of choice and all of those things. Thanks once again for being here. Until the next time, we are out.